Welcome back. This is section 1.2, adding integers with different signs. If you watched the last video, we talked about adding two numbers that have the same sign, two positives or two negatives. And in this video, we are going to talk about adding two numbers that are different, one positive, one negative. Let's take a look. To me, the easiest way to show this is by modeling it with counters. So let's take a look at an example where I model it using counters. So we start with this problem. It's 4 plus negative 2. Okay, so you want to start by laying out your counters. Okay, you lay out 4 positive counters, which I have on the bottom, and 2 negative counters, which I have on the top here. Okay, we are able to cancel out negatives and positives because if I have a negative 1 and a positive 1, together they cancel each other out. Negative 1 and a positive 1 equals 0. If you owe somebody $1, you give them $1. Now nobody owes anybody anything. Okay, so we do that. And you can see I've done that already. I cancel out these two and those two. Okay, basically what I've done by canceling out is I've subtracted away the two positives and the two negatives that were there. What I'm left with is my answer. So I'm left with 2 positive counters. And that means that my answer to 4 plus negative 2 is 2. What you can notice is that the answer is 2 less than what I started with. And that's because I added in a negative. If you add in a negative, it makes your number smaller. If you add in a positive, it makes your number larger. Okay. So let's take a second, try the next one on your own, come back, and we will go over it together. So the next problem we have is 6 plus negative 3, and they want me to model it using counters. So I want to start off, and I'm going to use yellow for my positive counters with my 6 positive counters. Let's change the size a little bit so it goes a little bit faster. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I want to add 3 negative counters. Change it to red and put in my 3 negative counters. So every positive and negative that I match up cancels out. And whatever I have left is my sum. Let me change my size. So I cancel out a positive and a negative matchup, positive negative matchup, and another positive negative matchup. What I'm left with is my answer. I'm left with 3 positive counters. And this means that 6 plus negative 3, my answer is positive 3. Okay, so that's how we do it using counters. Now I want to show you guys using a number line. So a number line is another great visual representation to show you what's exactly happening when you add up two different numbers, or two different signed numbers. So as we talked about in the last video, if I'm giving a number statement, this one is negative 7 plus 5, and I want to model on a number line, I do it the same way. I start with my first number. So as you can see, I plotted negative 7 on my number line. Okay. Then step 2 says skip the number of spaces in the second number. Well, I have a positive 5. If I add a positive, I move to the right. If I add a negative, I move to the left. Since I'm adding a positive 5 in this problem, I skip 5 spaces to the left. I mean to the right, sorry. 5 spaces to the right because it's positive. Where I end up is my answer. So after those 5 spaces are skipped, I end up right there at negative 2. Therefore, my answer to negative 7 plus 5 is negative 2. Okay, try the next example using a number line. It's really important that you understand how to use a number line to add or subtract numbers. So hopefully you paused the video and took a shot at the problem. So let's go over this one together. I'm going to model negative 3 plus 5 using a number line. So first step, as always, is to start with my first number. My first number is negative 3, so I want to plot negative 3 on my number line. Skip the number of spaces in the second number. We'll have a positive 5. This means I want to go 5 spaces to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where I end up is my solution, and I ended up at positive 2. Therefore, I know negative 3 plus 5 is positive 2. Okay, now that we've shown it using counters, shown it using a number line, we're going to talk about the rules for doing this. Because there's a rule that we can follow so that we don't have to always use a counter, or we don't have to always use a number line to add two numbers with different signs. So here we have our chart. The first rule we talked about in the last video: if you add two numbers with the same sign, you add the absolute values, keep the sign. So a positive and a positive give you a positive, a negative and a negative give you a negative. Okay, our rule for today, what we're talking about, is adding integers with different signs. So our rule is we subtract the smaller number from the larger number. So we're talking about absolute values. Okay, and then we keep the sign of the larger number. So in our example here, we have negative a 3 plus a negative 6. So we subtract the smaller number 3 from the larger number 6. 6 minus 3 is 3. And because 6 is a larger absolute value, we keep the sign that goes with the 6. So my answer is negative. Okay, so that's where I come up with negative 3. We'll do a couple examples in the next slide, and it'll start to be a little easier to see, a little clearer. So here we have a couple examples. In the first one, we have negative 13 plus a positive 6. Different signs, a negative 13 and a positive 6. First thing we do is subtract the absolute values. I do 13 minus 6, which gives me 7. Since 13 is larger, it's a larger absolute value, I keep whatever sign 13 had in the original problem. The 13 in the original problem had a negative sign. So instead of being 7, my answer is negative 7. Let's look at the second one. This time we have a positive number plus a negative number. Follow the same rules. We subtract the smaller absolute value from the larger one. So we do 36 minus 23, which is 13. Then we look, 36 is larger than 23. So we keep whatever sign 36 has in the original problem, which is a negative. Therefore, my answer is negative 13. Okay. The next slide has multiple problems to practice. Pause the video, work through a few of them, come back and I'll go over the answers. First problem. We have a negative 50 and a positive 22. So I want to subtract 50 minus 22, which gives me 28. 50 is a larger absolute value, so I keep whatever sign 50 has. My answer is negative 28. Number 2, 10 plus negative 17. Different signs. Subtract. 17 minus 10 is 7. Keep whatever sign the larger absolute value has. 17 is the larger absolute value, so I keep the negative sign that goes with it. 13 plus negative 13. Okay, I do 13 minus 13. They're different signs, which is 0. 0 is never positive nor negative, so I don't have to worry about a sign that goes with 0. Number 4, 21 plus negative 22. Okay, I subtract my absolute values. 22 minus 21 gives me 1. And I keep the sign of the larger absolute value. Then 22 is a larger absolute value, so I have a negative 1 as my answer. Number 5, negative 22 plus 0. I'm adding nothing, so it just stays negative 22. And number 6 is negative 18 plus 10. Subtract 18 minus 10 is 8. 18 has larger absolute value, so the answer is negative. Don't get confused because most of these answers are negative. If it were positive 18 and negative 10, the answer would be a positive 8 because 18 would be bigger and it would have a positive. You just keep the sign of whatever the larger number is. Okay? That's the easiest way to think about it. That's our basic rule, the rule that we follow. Subtract, keep the sign of the larger absolute value. Okay? If you follow that rule, you'll always come up with the correct solution. Hopefully you have the notes that go along with it. If you don't, click the link below to go to my Teacher Pay Teacher page. If you have any questions, leave a comment, contact me, ask, do whatever you have to do.